The anxieties around sexting and dirty talk have a lot of overlap, and most people fall on one side or the other of what they prefer, but they're both things that give folks a lot of anxiety. And I think a big part of it is simply that most of us don't have a ton of experience saying these words, like out loud with our face or even texting them to other people. Like, these aren't sentences that we string together often.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to another Focus Friday episode. This is season 2, episode 7. We're Finn and Emma, and today we are talking all about sexting.
Which, if you're not familiar, is when you have the sex via texting.
Have the sex via texting.
Right.
Yes, that's a perfect description.
And that's how I initiate all my sex. Hello, ma'am. Would you like to have the sex with me today?
Oh, boy.
Anyway, this conversation is actually amazing. We're talking with Bex Caputo. He will introduce himself better than we ever could, but he is a sex educator, kink educator, porn performer, and he sex a lot.
So he is an expert.
He is a sexpert.
Sexpert.
Yes.
Sure.
That was an easy one. I thought you were going to get that one.
Yeah,
okay.
No, it is. That was a good one.
We'll give you another chance later on.
Anyway, we cover a lot of topics in this episode, all about how do you get started sexting? How do you keep it going? What happens if one of you is not into it? Or like how to handle those situations? I don't know. It's a wide-ranging and amazing conversation with Bex.
Yeah, there's a ton of tips and tricks, plus a couple of bloopers. And there are also links in the show notes to all the different references and resources that Bex talks about. One other thing we did want to say here at the top, there is a conversation about halfway through or so where Bex talks about being on T, and he explains what that means a few minutes later, but we figured we'll save you a little confusion. Bex is a trans guy, so he's been on testosterone for a few years, and that's what he's referencing.
Yep.
So again, fantastic conversation. We're super pumped about this. It is fun, and it is amazing.
And a quick reminder, you can find the show notes on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, or go click on the link in your podcast player there as well. Also, while you're on our website, you can go check out our favorite resources. One of them is stdcheck.com. It's also one of our favorite affiliates of the podcast, and we just had to mention it here because it seems applicable, don't you think?
I think so, because you can say, well, how am I going to get an STI while I'm doing the sex while texting? And maybe you're not, but what if you're sexting
to lead up to something?
Foreplay.
Right.
So you're getting all hot and bothered and you're like, I need to jump in the car, drive 7 hours and go get this booty call on.
But you might want to get your self-tested first.
Yep. So
at stdcheck.com.
So the way you do that is you go to our website, you click on the links, you save $10, which brings the cost of a 10-panel test down to $130 plus. Bonus, you support the podcast financially, right, which we love. And then in about 24 hours, you get your results texted to you, and they're in your online portal, and you can show them to all of your sext partners and your sex partners.
and your sexting partners?
Anybody you want. Yeah, you can show them to anybody. There's no judgment here. So again, this is a service Emma and I use. It's super fast. It is super easy. We've been using it for years, and we absolutely love it. Check it out for yourself. We think you'll love it as well. And yeah, help you get your sext on.
Yes.
All right.
I think we're ready. Let's go talk to Bex.
All right.
No spoilers.
Oh, yeah.
What did I just say? I just said no spoilers. Like, oh, what do you mean about this shit? Let me spoil it.
Nope, no spoilers. I won't say anything either.
Right. All right. Well, welcome. I'm going to say welcome back to the show, Bex. I have no idea what order these episodes are coming out in, but you either already came on the show or you're going to come on the show in the future. And
this is our second. Yeah, right. This is our second recording with you.
Yes. in as many hours. So we're super thrilled to have you back. And we're here to talk about sexting today, which is texting and sex mashed into one, just in case nobody knew that. But before we do, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who Bex is and maybe why sexting is such a passion of yours?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm Bex, if you may have heard already, if not, foreshadowing. I am a sex and kink educator, working primarily along the East Coast. I teach most of my workshops online at this point because of COVID, but I teach all about sex and kink, including about sexting. And it is a particular passion of mine because I've been in quite a few long-distance relationships. Well, one major long-distance relationship and a handful of other shorter long-distance relationships. And sexting has been a core part of those. And it's also just something I really enjoy.
Yeah, I love it. Well, maybe to kick it off is sort of...
I probably should also mention I'm a porn performer who sexts people professionally and gets paid for it. That's probably a qualification.
I think so.
There. We'll call those your credentials. I love it. What makes you qualified to even talk about this? All right. So
afterthought.
Yeah.
So my first question is, I think it can be intimidating to people, right?
Well, it's vulnerable.
It can be very vulnerable, which I will argue I feel more comfortable sexting than I do like trying to speak the words to somebody because I can hide behind my screen.
Yeah.
And if I'm like, I'm going to say this thing and I can be like, oh, I don't get to see their reaction. So I'll just imagine it was good. Try to imagine it was good. But I think for somebody who's like saying like, hell no, never going to sext, it grosses me out or it squicks me out. What do you like for maybe that person who's like wants to dip a toe in? Where do you recommend starting?
Yeah, well, first of all, if your answer is like, hell no, I'm not into it, that's icky, whatever, you don't have to want to do the thing, of course. But if you're like, that's terrifying and kind of hot, you can absolutely explore it. Where to start, you have a couple of options. First of all, you can go to a site like Sext Panther or Night Flirt or your favorite sex worker's platform of choice and hire someone. They're not going to make fun of you. I promise you're paying them, right? So you can create a little context where you can explore this thing in a situation where the person is going to be excited about the thing that you're doing, right? And you can dip your toes in and see what it can look like to have a good experience doing that, right? That's a really great context to do that in. Also, you can just explore with a partner or someone you feel super comfortable being particularly vulnerable with. You're not going to wait until a moment when you feel totally fine. Like, there's never going to be a moment where you're not a little nervous about doing it. I sex people professionally and someone hot sends me a nude and I'm like, oh God, oh shit, fuck. I got to say a thing. Shit. Okay. No, I could be hot. No, it's fine. Very chill. It's fine. Right? Like,
so your point is that it's okay to have the little freak out moments in your head at all times, at any point. Like, right. It doesn't matter because we're all human.
Right. And it's still nerve-wracking doing hot things with someone you're attracted to, right? So I don't think you have to wait for a point or expect there to be a moment where you're suddenly going to be super comfortable, right? I think when you're dipping your toes in, it can be helpful to do it in circumstances and with people that you feel safe and comfortable with, and you know they're not going to do whatever that thing you're terrified is, make fun of you for your word choice or suddenly not be turned on or whatever.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the idea because like, I know something that can come up. I think we've heard it quite a bit in the past of like, people are like, we're interested in a threesome, we're interested in something like that. And they're like, well, we're going to go hire a sex worker. And it's like a low pressure way where I think Dan Savage is like, you're not paying them for the sex, you're paying them to go away afterwards. And I know that's a bit of a harsh thing, but like you are paying for an
practice.
Yeah, you're paying for an experience in a closed, safe environment. And I think that recommendation of like, go hire someone professionally and like practice with them. Like, I think that's an amazing tip I would never have even thought of.
Well, I just wanted to ask, like, if someone were to do that, can you describe the process a little bit so that people have an understanding?
Yeah,
absolutely. So there are a couple of different paths you can take, right? Is a site called Sext Panther, which is the one that I am familiar with. And there's also one called Night Flirt, which I am less familiar with. But they are both platforms that allow you that are specifically for sexting on. So you can browse their list of models, whatever, and they will have their rates, $1 per message or whatever. And generally you pay for the messages you send, not the ones you receive. Right? So you can have a conversation there. Models will list the things they're excited about talking about and that sort of thing. And you'll find something that suits your interests. Alternatively, if you have a venue you already go to for your porn, if you have a Twitter feed full of OnlyFans models that you like, or, an OnlyFans list of people or whatever, you can approach one of those models and ask them if they offer sexting sessions. Many of them do, either through a platform for it or, flat rate and sex me on WhatsApp or whatever that looks like, right? So if you have someone that you're excited about, you can say, hi, and I would approach them up front. Hi, do you offer sexting sessions? Can you tell me your rates, right? Up front, I have money I would like to give you. Tell me what that looks like. Because we get a lot of time wasters and you want to distinguish yourself from them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good tip too.
Yeah. And so you've maybe done some practice now with a professional, or you've just gone to your partner and said that it's something you want to do, or maybe you haven't. Like, how do you recommend initiating that conversation?
Yeah.
Is it just open with a dick pic, I assume? That's how we do most things?
Yeah. Not so much. The way I say in my workshop, suddenly sexting TM is a mood, right? For people that you have an established relationship with. There are certain people who can send me a dick pic out of the blue and I would be like, why, hello. That is not the frequency of people that send, I get way more dick pics than that and never from those people, right? So I would say in most cases, if you have never sexted with someone before, I like bringing up the concept of the thing in a context, possibly even outside them doing it, right? This is how I like to approach any new sexy thing I want to do with someone. I don't necessarily say, hey, would you like to sext me? I will say, I was reading this article about sexting. Have you ever done something like that? Right? Because putting someone right on the spot and thinking about, I want you to do this thing with me, presumably soon, is a lot more stressful than, have you ever considered this concept? And then you can get an idea of if they enjoy it, if they don't, and get the conversation rolling. The other way I sometimes approach it, right, is similarly to how I initiate sex, right? People think that sexting is this totally separate thing because it happens in this digital place, but it's not, right? Initiation could look like a gradual escalation, taking turns, moving towards slightly more explicit conversation, right? So I might start with a little bit of flirting, and then maybe my flirt gets a little saucier. And if they take it a little spicier, then I keep moving. The metaphor in my head is like a staircase, right? I'm not going to jump 4 stairs ahead of them. That's going to make it hard to communicate with them. But I might step 1 stair ahead or 1 stair below, and that will kind of help us adjust the energy, right? And we can move the staircase together, alternating. So that is what initiating sex feels like in person for me, and it is also often what sexting feels like for me.
Yeah.
I love the idea, like you said, to bring up the conversation, not in a putting them on the spot way, because and somebody could do that totally innocently of hey, I'm just curious. You could be too forward, too fast without meaning to. And so if it's easier just to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you ever considered this? Especially if it's someone new. Or, even in a long-term relationship, if it's something that you've been in a relationship for 15 years and it's never been part of your relationship, well, who knows? Your partner may have thought about it. So bring it up in that way too. Hey, have you ever considered this? And I would like to talk about it and see if that's something that we could bring to our relationship, possibly.
Yeah. And I honestly, frankly, would think sometimes those more established relationships are the harder ones to bring it up in because you feel like you have the way that this works. you know the things about your partner, and they've been your partner for however many years, right? So sometimes that's harder. And I am like happy to be the scapegoat in those situations. Like I was listening to some guy on a podcast talking about sexting, and it got me thinking, have you ever thought about it, right? You can present it like you encountered this idea in the world, not like you've been thinking about it for the last 3 weeks and trying to come up with a way to bring it up, right? That might be true. That can also feel like a lot of pressure, right? So you can be like, I've encountered this idea, right? And raise the conversation that way. Because functionally, do you want to do this thing and have you ever thought of this thing may feel the same, but in receiving them when you haven't considered the idea before, it can feel different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I might add one piece to that, which is I think I would probably take the additional step of saying like, I am interested in, or I have thought of this, or it intrigues me, using that as sort of a way to tell that other person, like, especially if it's, can be maybe a taboo thing. And if you put them quote unquote on the spot and they're going to be like, oh no, I would never. Right. And then you're like, oh shit, but like, if you can state your interest up front in a like low pressure way, like, hey, feel free to say no. Like we don't have to, but like, I think this might be fun. What do you think? Cause then it gives them the freedom to say, oh, I'm safe here. I can share my actual desire and you're not going to judge me for it.
Right. And you've role modeled that vulnerability for them and shown what it could look like to express interest. And you don't like, if you're not comfortable, it doesn't have to even look like, and I'm really into this thing. It can look like I encountered this and I'm curious about it. I'm really like, this is really interesting. Like, or it can just like, just nudge that door open a little bit for them so that they feel like they can step through it and get that conversation going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I love that. And so I think like having covered a little bit of like, well, I think consent is sort of built in there. Even like, I think even in an existing relationship, to be able to text the person and say, hey, I'm in this mood today. Are you open to that? Like, is that a space you're in today? Versus like they wake up and roll over and they're pulling the sleep out of their eyes. And all of a sudden there's like this like super graphic, like lit erotica story. Like, while that's amazing, I worry that could set you up for disappointment because you may not get the response you want and you've just been super vulnerable. So I feel like that consent can actually like, that really benefits both of you. You're not going to throw something vulnerable out there and have it land like like a rock.
Right, exactly. I definitely recommend kind of testing the waters with someone before you're sending them something particularly explicit, unless you are like very established in the ways that y'all relate to each other, in which case you know your relationship better than I do. But in most instances, I recommend testing the waters simply because the thing about sexting is, by definition, we're probably not in the same place. I mean, I can sext you across the room when we're at a party and that's fun in a different way. But for the most part, I got no idea what you're doing, right? And if you're sitting at brunch with your mom, maybe you're not in the mood to sext me right now, right? And even just, are you, especially if I'm sending you nudes or something, right? Are you in a situation where you can get a screen full of my ass and not get in trouble, right? So whether that is explicitly like, hey, I had a dream about you and I'd love to tell you, or like, can I tell you this thing I've been thinking about doing to you all morning, right? Something that is like a little spicy and teases the waters or whatever. You could also have something like, you could very explicit, hi, would you like to sex today, right? Or you can have like, depending on your relationship, if the person is worried about notifications popping up on their screen, you can have something that between the two of you means, hey, are you in a place where you can sext right now, right? Hey, are you available to go over those reports, or, whatever the fuck it looks like. But something, because
a code word.
Exactly. Because we're going to have, a lot of us have our phones just out. And sometimes you don't know what someone's privacy settings are before you send them pictures of your holes.
Well, and I will say right there, I know there are some people who land in the camp of like, oh, well, Yeah. And this is a whole different consent conversation, but like talking about it beforehand ruins the spontaneity and it's not as fun. And it's like, is it? Or like, how fun would it be if you sent a dick pic to your partner and they had just handed their phone to their kid to play on Minecraft or YouTube? And now it pops up in the notification. Like, so maybe consent is pretty important here. Not just for the obvious reasons.
And like, if you are a person who it is really hot to like randomly get pictures of your partner's junk, like that's fine. That's an energy. You don't have to necessarily have a conversation every time you send them.
Exactly.
But you better have one conversation that says, what is the best way for me to send you nudes if I want to send them randomly? Yep. Right? Yeah. Is there an app we can put them in that doesn't show preview notifications of the photos, or is that a setting I can turn off in some section, right? Like, talk about what, because you might have a situation in which that really works for y'all, but like, you should probably be familiar with their phone settings at least a little bit, or what you're setting them up for, you know?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I love that.
So we kind of established options for like seeking someone out to help that, you know, practice with a sex worker. We've established like ways to bring it up with your partner and kind of and how to make sure you're having that consent conversation. But once we're past all that and we're like, okay, we're gonna actually get to this, and
now we got to say shit.
Right. Yeah. What's your advice there?
That's the big question, right? What do you say? That's what I get all the time. So I'm actually looking at my notes for my workshop here because I have a whole list of ideas, right? And the obvious one, the one that every sex educator will give you is the talk about what you're going to do, talk about what you're doing, and talk about what you did. That's one of Dan Savage's favorites, right? And that is the easiest go-to, right? I can't wait to suck your cock later. God, your cock feels so good in my mouth. Wow, I loved sucking your cock the other night. Ta-da. In addition to that, though, other ideas, you can say things like, what do you think it would be like to ... right? You know, what do you think it would feel like to touch me when I feel this way? Or what do you think it would feel like to try this thing? I do... a favorite of mine is last night I had a dream where, or I was daydreaming about, or last night I got off thinking about XYZ, right? To kind of set up a scenario. Or I watched some porn the other day or read some lit erotica the other day and I can't stop thinking about something. What would you do if I, and then kind of filling in a scenario here, right? I wonder, which is just... I wonder what you'd do if I XYZ, or I wonder what it would feel like if I, right? So a lot of what sexting looks like for me is like building up some sort of imaginary scenario or reminiscing on something that we've done, right? And then taking that kind of skeleton of an idea, right? And just building in detail to flesh out the scenario and make it feel a little bit more real.
Yeah. And so let's say you go ahead and initiate this. You've gone through all the consent pieces and now the other person's like, okay, my partner just sent me this amazing thing and I read it. What the hell do I say back? Do I go, you said, oh, I want to do this. And you go, yes. How do we respond in a way that then like keeps it going? Or what happens if the thing they said isn't something we want to talk about? Maybe. Well,
and I think that's a separate.
It is.
Let's get there in a second.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first half of that, and then we'll wrap around to that because the first answer, I think I'm going to guess you're familiar with the first rule of improv, which is yes and. It is one of the first rules of sexting as well. If your partner offers something that you are excited about, accept their proposition and build on it, right? You're going to do those things to me. Great. So from there, I could talk about what I would like you to do next. I could take the idea that you're describing and elaborate on it, right? So if you're touching me in this way, this is how I would react. This is what it would feel like physically on my body, right? Like your hands are so soft or whatever. It could also be, this is what it would feel like emotionally, right? Like, oh God, your hand on my throat makes me feel like your subby little boy, right? Like it could be, so I want to describe my experience of what it would feel like to experience what you've described to me. Also tapping into your senses, right? So what would I see if I was experiencing what you described? What would I hear, smell, taste, right? What sounds would I make? And sometimes I like to get meta with it, right? So if I'm not living in this scenario with you and fleshing out this scenario by either, adding detail or extending it, I talk about how I responded to the message I just got. Like, gosh, I really hope the other people in this mall can't tell how blushy I am right now. Or like, you would not believe the sound I made when I read what you just wrote to me right now. Right? So as a way to like re-emphasize, or even like, I'm so hard right now, right? Emphasize the reactions that, like the fact that, hey, your text got the response you wanted, that I am having. And there is something particularly fun, at least for me, about describing a physical response to something that's just a message, right? It makes me feel, as the person who sent it, particularly powerful, which is quite fun.
Yeah. I love it.
And now circling back to the second part of Finn's question is, what if you don't, like, what if it hits you wrong and you're like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, and you don't know how to respond because you don't want to let that other person down, but maybe it's not your jam.
Right. So I say the first rule is yes and. There are obviously things that you're not going to super be into. And that is a spectrum, right? So if the answer is no, I don't want to talk about this thing, or I don't want to sext you, or no, like it can be as easy as no is a complete sentence. And if you are trying to, I would still like to be sexting you. I would still like to be like developing some sort of rapport and relationship with you. No is not so much a complete sentence. That's not actually going to facilitate those goals for you. You probably want more than that. So generally what I would do in that situation is, if it is like a hard limit for me, if I'm like, absolutely not, I might say, hey, I'm not comfy talking about that, but I would love to talk about this. Might even give them some context. That way they know like that's very off limits. If it's not my jam, but I don't care. Like, you could talk about anal with me. It's not necessarily going to turn me on, but fine, whatever. I might just gentle redirect, right? Like, actually, I'm not so much into getting my ass fucked tonight, but like, I can't stop thinking about how good you'd feel in my front hole. Right? A gentle redirect and make the other option hot and fun and like, actually not so much, but like, I would love to do this. Cause no one is going to hear like, but actually I can't stop thinking about the way your cum tastes and be like, I don't know. That doesn't sound fun. Right? Like they're gonna take the other path and be like, great, sure. Sounds good. Excellent. Right? So offer them the graceful way to take the no and give them that other opportunity to reemphasize, I want to be here and I want to be doing this. Just not exactly that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And maybe along the same lines, like you've thrown out a lot of different euphemisms for different holes and positions and acts, body parts.
Are you look for a thesaurus?
Well, how do you know? Well, how do you navigate which words to use? Because you could find 200 different words for penis. How do you know which one to go with?
Yeah, that's a complicated one. There are several paths, right? First of all, you can straight up ask, right? Which is a thing that I do. Sometimes that can feel clunky, and admittedly, it is a trickier thing to do gracefully. The other thing that I do is wait for them to say it first. Have opportunities where, presumably, if we're exchanging conversation, I might just say, like, get to a point where I'll end my side of the conversation with, and then I start reaching down to your pants and unbuttoning them and sliding inside. The next thing you're going to say to me is probably what you call your genitals. And like, you're probably going to pick the words that you find sexy. One of the things I do most when I'm sexting is get really curious about the language my partner uses. And I use that to learn the things they find hot, the bits of the scenario that they're focused on, right? If like we're sexting and you keep mentioning the way I smell, that's probably a pretty erotic scent, right? So I am going to look at the language you use, and very obviously I will take like the words you use for your body and parrot them back to you because you've role modeled what you like. But I will also like pull other bits from there. However, I can't always rely on someone to have used the word I wanted before it comes up, right? Sometimes I do need to ask the thing. And often I will try and do that in a somewhat flirty way. Like a thing that comes up for me a lot in kink is I will often want to call someone an honorific, right? Ma'am or mistress or sir, whatever. And that's not something they often role model first. But I might say, like, send them something, oh yes, I would love to worship at your feet. And then in parentheses say, I'm feeling compelled to call you an honorific. Can you tell me which one you would like? Right? So I love using parentheses for like little stage whispery kind of asides. And I can use that to like set myself up for the moment when I would use that. So like I'm still saying something hot and like fun and say like, I want a word here and I don't know which one it is. Can you let me know which one would be appropriate? This is particularly fun in kinky context because you have that deference, but you can use it for any. And in most cases, I find people are quite smitten with my desire to use words they like rather than like, oh, that's so clunky.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than getting hung up on the semantics of it all, like
exactly.
your attempt,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
Well, and I think like that's actually my personal favorite approach. I love the like, yeah, you walk them up to the line and then you let them take you across the line and tell you the words to use. Mm-hmm. But like for me, and this is probably my own personal like fears of offending people, I'm very much the like, and I think this is it parallels to just in-person sex as well. Of like, how do you like sex? Like, how do you like to be touched? How do you like to touch people? Where do you like to be touched? Like, what words do you like to use? How do you like to be talked to? Like, all of these things. And like, if you can talk about those things for, that doesn't need to be a 4-hour conversation. But if you have this conversation, then you can go into something that could be intimidating with a whole lot less fear. Because you're like, oh, I want to say a thing, but I'm afraid it's going to come off weird. But like now you've gotten that out of the way and like they told you they like this word or that word, and you can tread a lot more freely.
Yeah, you can feel confident because you're basically working from like a word bank of words you already know they find sexy. I don't know if y'all are familiar with a yes, no, maybe list. It's a kinky tool.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
But please describe it.
It's a kinky tool generally designed for taking activities and sorting your interest in them. Yes, I want to do the thing. No, I don't want to do the thing. Maybe once I learn more about the thing, maybe if you take me out to dinner first, whatever that looks like, right? So you can do that with activities, certainly, but you can also do it with words. And it's the thing I do with language a lot. So you can easily send someone a word bank of sexy words. I have one on my website. It's my favorite, but others exist. And allow them to sort them into 3 categories: words they find sexy, words that they don't, and words that are sexy, like maybe in certain contexts or whatever. And then you can work from a place of like, no, I know the words that turn you on, and I can use them to weave a story that is fun for both of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I was, because I knew we were having this conversation today, I was thinking earlier today about sexting and some different like games to play with it. And I have spent some time in your yes, no, maybe list, and that's not a euphemism, but like I was just thinking, like you can almost create like a Mad Lib game out of it, especially if you're just kind of getting started. Like, hey, here's a list of 20 words. Pick 3 of them and tell me a sexy story that incorporates these 3, and then you get to see what are the 3 words that they were drawn to. And where do they go with those 3 words? And then you get to like learn about this person. You get to play. You're playing in a safe sandbox because they picked the words. You get to learn a whole lot, and you get a sexy story out of it. So
No, I love
was a
that.
fun
And
way
I
to do
love
it.
playing these little games with things and stuff. Because I think so. The anxieties around sexting and dirty talk have a lot of overlap, and most people fall on one side or the other of what they prefer, but they're both things that give folks a lot of anxiety. And I think a big part of it is simply that most of us don't have a ton of experience saying these words, like out loud with our face or even texting them to other people. Like, these aren't sentences that we string together often, that we don't even know necessarily how they sound coming out of our mouths, like in our voices, right? So another really great way to practice that, I love this idea, and I also like folks, I will recommend reading erotica to each other or sending stories back and forth. And what's fun about that is you can highlight and pull out the parts that you find sexy and the sentences you like, and learn what written erotic material your partner finds hot without having to pen the words yourself at first, right? You can see the words that they have found, and you can see what it looks like, right? If you're reading them out loud to each other, you can hear what it sounds like in your voice, right? And talk about the bits that are really hot and the bits that you're like, that one didn't so much work for me, right? And learn your tastes with a little bit less vulnerability, right? Someone else is doing that vulnerability for you when they wrote the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And just to build on that just a little, and I'm curious, Emma, if you remember this, many moons ago, we used to send each other this type of thing via email.
Via email.
And we would I would go in and like do a find replace on the names and swap the names for our names. So then it was almost like we wrote the story for us. And I don't know, it just had.
I remember that.
All right, just making sure it landed.
That's excellent. That's delightful.
That was early on.
That was early, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
We should probably.
I love encouraging folks to like share the stuff that gets them off, because it's just, I don't know, it's like, it is a fun way to show things that are hot, and then like from there you can start the conversation of, oh, would you like to try this thing maybe, or you don't necessarily have to. You can just enjoy that, like, look at this weird thing that turned me on for a minute. Like, the number of times that I watch porn at like 1 a.m. and the next day I'm like, hey, pet, look at this weird shit I found. Like,
yeah.
But it's just a really great way to like connect and share, like, I don't know, what turned you on that week.
Right? Yeah. We just had a conversation the other day with somebody who was like talking about, like, they get done masturbating and then they're like looking at it, they're like, what the fuck did I just get off to? And then they're like, oh, what happened there? But okay. So I love that.
Where our minds go.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Well, then you have that sort of like post orgasm like drop. And maybe the thing that was like super hot to you 30 seconds ago, you're like, oh my God, what did I do? And like, not that I've ever experienced that. But
that drop comes from tea. That shit is new. I did not have that a while ago.
Interesting. Wow.
I can relate to that. I think the drop for him is much different than mine, for sure.
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
It definitely became a lot more distinct post-tea, which was like, I expected shit to change, but I was like, I am a cartoon character right now. What the fuck? And I had to like relearn how to manage my refractory period and things. Cause for a minute there, I was like, sorry, I'm dead to the world for the next 20 minutes. I don't know what you want from me. I just lay here. That's all I have.
Yep.
Yeah. And I don't know if I can't remember in the introduction if you mentioned that you were trans as well. So I want to just like come back and mention that as that too. Yes.
These are trans jokes for folks who haven't listened. I'm a trans guy. I've been on T for 5 years. 5 years in 4 days.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
It will be my 5-year anniversary. So yeah, it does some weird shit to your body, man. Puberty. Yeah. Once is enough.
I'm still waiting for it. One of these days I'll be able to grow a beard. So yeah, they tell me when I hit 35, maybe. So.
I can maybe get a mustache on a good day, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm right there.
No, but that is a really interesting point. And just thanks for sharing your experience of that change of the drop.
Yeah.
Bodies are weird, man.
Right?
Anyway, sexting.
So how about incorporating, maybe words aren't your thing. Like,
yeah. What do you, other suggestions? I was going to say, like, photos, videos, other ideas?
Audio. Yeah, because you could just send a voice message, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The smartphones, I'm going to quote Dan Savage again. I really don't quote him this often. But a porn studio in your pocket. But like, yeah, you have a whole slew of opportunities, which is really nice, to find the medium that works for you. They're all going to have different energies, right? I find sending voice messages quite stressful. Receiving them make me very nervous in a fun, subby way, but in also a like, oh God, I couldn't possibly. So like understanding how your partner feels about different kinds of messaging and how they respond to them they're all tools in your tool belt that you can use in different ways. So voice messages are good for longer-winded things. They're also good for, you're going to get all the breathy sounds and the moans and also just your partner's tone of voice, right? They're good for emphasis, especially, right? If you want to suddenly go from written to you're hearing the thing in my voice, right? Whether I am a dominant using that as an opportunity to give a particular command, or whether like we're sexting and I'm getting off and you get to hear the audio of that bit or whatever. But I tend to use them for punctuation. Folks can use them for any sort of thing. Pictures and video is a whole other skill set of creating them. But I make porn. I'm a big fan of them. The way I have gotten better at taking pictures and videos of my body is by doing it a lot and by looking at other people who do it. There are a lot of people in my feed who have bodies similar to mine, and there are plenty of times where I'm like, I've never looked at my ass from that angle, but theirs looks great. Let me go get my phone, right? So I'm not going to copy entire things from other people. That's shitty and, bad business practices. But like, you can draw inspiration from different angles or perspectives or that sort of thing. Similarly, when I'm thinking about angles, if I'm thinking about what angles I look best at, but I also, with sexting, will think about what angles they might be looking at me from if we were doing the thing we were doing.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm talking about you going down on me, I'm probably going to angle the camera down near my junk so it's like you're looking up at me. Right? If I am talking about being particularly submissive, I might have the camera a little bit higher up over my head so it's like I'm looking up at you, right? And pictures and videos don't have to be explicit to be sexy, right? So just because you're not comfy sending a picture of your bits doesn't mean you can't include photos in your sexts, right? You can send a picture of a toy you just finished using or 2 different pairs of underwear and say, which one do you want to see me wear tonight? You can send a picture of your boots and tell someone to lick them, right? Again, we're revealing that I'm a pervert, but there are a vast majority of things that are not explicitly sexy in a way, oh gosh, I don't want pictures like that of me out in the world, that you could still share to emphasize the things you're talking about, right? Even a picture of a chair with the caption, I can't wait to bend you over this, is suddenly a sext, even if the picture itself is totally innocuous.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a great point to bring up because it does, it's rightfully so that people are nervous about putting pictures of themselves out there. And so, and that's actually leads into another question is how do you navigate that for yourself? Because, or work with people on that fear? Because it's a totally legitimate concern, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, the answer is just trust. And how do you define a nebulous thing like that, right? It is a process of putting things out into the world is a whole other hurdle to leap over. But just sending a thing to a person that you are sexting, right? That alone can be nerve-wracking. And there are layers of trust there, right? There is trust that you are going to protect this in the way that you would protect your own nudes, or in the way that a reasonable person would expect their own stuff to be protected, right? But there's also trust that you're going to respond well to it, and you're going to still think I'm hot, and you're going to give me the, like, correct amount of enthusiasm to, like, reward my vulnerability here, right? And that comes from role modeling little bits of vulnerability and having that trust respected, right? And, you know, having conversations with your partner. I don't think anyone that is, like, really enthusiastic about pushing you to do the thing is someone who is necessarily going to be the best person to trust. I more look at green flags as someone who is really eager to talk to you about why you're uncomfortable doing this. And, you know, maybe they're open that, like, no, I would love pictures of your ass. I want you to send them to me when you're comfortable, but, like, no, I would deeply love, like, they can still be enthusiastic about it. But you want someone who is also eager to do it in a context where you are comfortable, to talk to you about, if you are a person who cares a lot about, like, data security, what encrypted apps are we going to use? Where are you going to store this on your phone, or on, like, is it going to get uploaded to clouds, etc., right? I sound like an old man. I don't interwebs and things. But if data security is important to you, you know the questions to ask around that, and you should be comfortable having these conversations. If anyone's going to be cagey about what they're going to do with your nudes, that's when you start to get wary, right? But yeah, I wish there was a better answer than just, we do this with people we trust, and we hope that people we trust are worthy of that trust.
Yeah. I have 2 points. One of them is a funny story that also has a lesson built into it. And the other one is just on the thought about, like, what to send. I think there's you talked about different things, different ideas and ways to get ideas. One of them that I've always thought is fun is to, like, I'll say, like, hey, go find a picture on the internet that you want to see me recreate, or send me 3 of them and I'll pick 2, or I'll pick 1, whatever, or sending it in, you know, in the other way. So that way you give the person, like, I want to see you like this. And I think there's something kind of fun to that. For me personally. And the anecdote, my blooper is
I know this story. I know which one you're going to tell without even.
I know. I'm aware. And it has a lesson built in. So the lesson is that WhatsApp, at least by default, as far as I know, auto saves messages.
Yes, it does.
Photos.
Auto saves media, photos and videos to your phone, probably in some folder. But on my phone, it saved it into a folder, but then that folder then shows up in, like, my main photo feed. So we had been communicating with a couple and had received what I would say is probably our first dick pic ever.
Consensually.
Yeah. And I had responded with one to this couple. And then a couple of months later, we, like, our current partners, we'd started these relationships. And this was the first time I'd ever really been like, hey, other person I'm interested in, like, would you actually want a dick pic? And she was like, yeah, I would. Yeah. So I jumped into my phone. I was like, well, I can't take one right now, but, like, I could send one, but it's a little bit, it's a couple months old, but it hasn't changed a whole lot. So I scrolling through and the little thumbnail, and I was like, oh, there's 2 photos. I don't remember taking 2 photos, but anyway, grabbed one, sent it. As soon as it sent, I was like, well, that's not our coffee table. We don't have an orange coffee mug. And then I was like, immediately, I was like, oh shit, not mine. And she's like, what the fuck do you mean not yours? And I was like, well, that's not my dick. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
apparently there's other ones on my phone. I was
like, I had 2. I had a 50-50 shot and I missed. So, like, the first dick pic I sent to my partner was not even my own. And then I had to text the guy and be like, so fun story. I accidentally sent your dick pic to a partner. Didn't know it got saved to my phone. So we took care of that problem. And he was like, he thought it was funny and it was a good time. So the moral of the story is be careful what gets auto-saved to your phone and where, and double check before you send things, because you never know whose dick you're sending to who.
Yeah, I learned that. So I also have WhatsApp primarily for sexting, and also learned that it automatically downloads things when opening Google Photos, like chatting with someone all that, and like got like lots of good stuff or whatever, and then opened Google Photos. And it was just a sea of his dick. And I was like, oh, Jesus. I mean, hello. I mean, no. I mean, well. Anyway, we're just going to lock that folder. I mean, like, I do stress out anytime I show someone a picture on my phone and they reach for it. Absolutely not. Like, you don't get to hold my phone while looking at pictures. There is more porn than safe for work pictures on that thing. Absolutely not.
Yeah. And it's fun when you meet somebody who is in the know, because they'll take your phone and then they'll go, can I swipe? And you're like, you know what? You can, because you asked. Swipe away. Like, I don't. Like, you earned it. Go ahead and swipe away. So
but be prepared.
Exactly.
Sure, but you don't know what you're going to find. So yeah.
That's my answer. It's like, as long as you're okay with what you find. Honestly, there's a number of people in my life that haven't seen my nudes at this point. I live a weird life.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Do you have anything else that you want?
I have another thing.
Sorry. Okay, you had two. You spoke two. I thought I spoke
two. I was only allowed two.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm going over my quota. So this one is sort of like a catch-all of like, I know, Bex, you've been in probably a lot of different relationship dynamics, some that are maybe long distance, some that are near distance, short distance, I guess is the opposite of long. New relationships, existing relationships. How do you see sexting show up, like, in all of these different dynamics? And do you still feel it has a place in like maybe a 10-year-old relationship where
you live together,
you know everything, you live together, you don't, like, where is the opportunity to like work sexting in there versus like, I can see a long distance, it makes sense, but like, what is your take on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly there are people who come to sexting out of like a need, right? Out of circumstance and long distance, and this is our best access to sex type things. But there are a ton of other functions it can serve, right? I mean, it can be fun. So my favorite thing about sexting is it can be done in otherwise vanilla scenarios, right? So I might live with my partner, but if they're at the office and I'm at my job or whatever, we can still enjoy sexting as foreplay for doing something later on when we get home, right? I love sexting as foreplay in general. If we're talking like NRE type stuff, a really great way to like dabble in. We're going to play. We're getting to know each other's preferences. I'm learning about the way you're talking about having your body touched, and eventually I'm going to get to do those things. But there are still things to learn, even when I've been dating someone for 10 years, right? Like, there are plenty of times where someone might describe touching their body in a particular way, and I'm like, wow, I haven't actually thought about that, right? So there are things to explore there. There's also, like I said, the fun of like sexting at work, or even being at the same party and like sexting little like dirty things under the table next to each other or whatever, so that you have this like private conversation in this public experience. That's really fun. You can also sexting. The beautiful thing about sexting is there really aren't limits on what you can do, as long as the people you're doing them with want to do those and are having fun with them, right? I can't have sex in space or have my partner literally consume me while we're fucking like a vampire, right? Or werewolf or something, right? But they can tell me in detail what it would be like to do that, right? So if you have fantasies of things that you aren't ready to explore, right? Threesomes are complicated, especially if you're not used to having them. Bringing a whole other human into your dynamic is an emotionally fraught thing to navigate, and you have a third person with a whole other set of feelings that you're dealing with. Sexting about a threesome? So much easier, right? So it might be a practical thing that's feasible, but just too much work right now. Or it could be impossible, right? Sex at the bottom of the sea. I'm going to get fucked by a tentacle monster, and you're going to tell me all about it, right? All kinds of absurd things that you're like, I don't know, but I thought about it and it was kind of hot, right? You can dabble in something that you want to explore one day or that you're never going to, but like this like shared imagination space of a sexting session is such a fun way to dabble in things and try things out. It's like the Star Trek holodeck, right? You can try it on without like having to really live through it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that. And one of the things you touched on in there is actually one of my favorite things to actually recommend to people is like because I think using texting or sexting as foreplay is such a great tool. But we've talked to so many people who are like, oh, it's so hard to transition from like a stressful day at work, or I've just been like dealing with the kids and now, well, I put the kids to bed and my partner's ready to like get it on. And I've just been in like mom brain or dad brain or whatever, parent brain. And it's like, but if you can, it's even like, it's the foreplay to the foreplay, right? It's the like, let's get in that mindset. Like, let's shift out of crazy mode to like sexy mode and let's do it, via texting. And I think it's just, I think it's a really great tool for making that transition easier where you're not like, oh, now we got to like power through some, sex tonight. It's like, no, we've been talking about this all day and we're just like ready for it. And like, and it's like, throw the damn kid in the bed and let's get in there. Cause we've been like, I've been waiting to do this for 12 hours. So it really changes the dynamic.
Yeah. I hear a lot of people, kind of push back against the idea of scheduled sex or planned sex as if it is like boring or takes out the mood or whatever. My Virgo ADHD ass is like, no, I get to organize and anticipate and plan a thing and then do it. Fantastic. Love that. Ideal situation for me. But if you are a person who like, looking at the calendar and seeing date and knowing that like sex is coming is like less fun for you, sexting is a really great way to like, no, builds that anticipation and take this planned thing and help it feel like, I don't know, a little more deliberate and anticipated, I suppose.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I won't interrupt you this time as you try to wrap it up.
Oh, no, it's okay. I mean,
I think I'm out of things finally.
No, it was an amazing conversation and wide ranging. And, I hope that a takeaway from this is that there's ways to add sexting to your relationships or life that can be fun and low stress and work for you. And
maybe even make you maybe you're really good at it and now you're on Sext Panther.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe make you some money too. And I just encourage people to get curious and see what works for them. And it may not work for you, or you may be an expert by now. So, yeah.
I love it. Well, Bex, can you tell people where they can find you, all of your work? And actually, one of the things on your website is a primer on sexting, so they can read a nice little concise version of this. Maybe they would like, there's actually a bunch of examples on how to do the yes and it's a really great resource. So how do people find all of this stuff? And show notes will be populated with all of the links to everything you're about to say.
Excellent. You can head to bextalksex.com, which has that sexting primer. It's called Write It Better Than You Ever Felt It, which is a Fall Out Boy reference for any folks who didn't catch that one. Brings me deep joy, and it's a joke only for me, but it's fine. But that's over at bextalksex.com. I have all my resources there. I also have a workshop by the same name and a number of other workshops that you can see over there. I teach workshops every Wednesday at 7:30 Eastern on Zoom. Tickets, again, available at my website, bextalksex.com. I'm BexTalkSex on Twitter and Instagram. I advertise and such, hang out with y'all over there. And if you would like the naked or sexier side of this thing that I do online, you can go to @BillyLore on Twitter or @BillyLore_ on Instagram and find all of my links there. Promise, real good at telling you how to give me money. I need it to survive.
Love it. And I'm ashamed that we have to do this again. You also have a podcast. I had to remind you of this.
Yes, I also have a podcast.
I had to remind you of this on our last conversation.
I also have a podcast called The Dildorks. All things sex, dating, and masturbating and kink conversations with my best friend, Kate Sloan, who is a sex blogger and sex journalist and just real clever human being. We release new episodes every Tuesday, so you can search The Dildorks in your favorite podcast app to join us over there.
Awesome.
Love it. Wow.
Well, yes.
I know how to do my job.
Right. Good thing you have the reminder there. But thank you again, Bex, for everything. And hopefully we'll send a bunch of people your way. So thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
And we're back. A huge thank you to Bex for coming on the show and everything that you shared and for this amazing conversation all about sexting. We hope all of you learned something and go check it out. I'm sorry. No, that's not what I was going to say. Go try it out.
That's right.
And let us know how it goes.
I couldn't agree more. I will say THX Bex. I'm going to speak in text for the rest of this outro.
Oh my gosh. Okay. This is going to be interesting. No one's going to listen to this. They're just going to go, oh, I'm done with this episode now.
Anyway, TY Bex for coming on the podcast.
Okay, I'm going to take over. So thank you, Bex, for everything. We love the work that you do, and we're excited to get this out there. A quick reminder, links to everything that Bex mentions are on our website in the show notes. You can get there by going to normalizingnonmonogamy.com and clicking on the podcast tab, or just by following the link in your little podcast player.
I agree. Come on, you have to admit you've LOL'd a few times during this.
Okay. You're just over there thinking about different texting.
I've been thinking about them for weeks. I've been thinking about them for weeks. This isn't new.
Okay, and I challenge you. How do you sext in those terms? In acronyms and short abbreviations?
Check your phone.
Okay. Challenge accepted.
So anyway, next Wednesday, we have another amazing interview with Allie and Galen. They live on a boat. They're boat people. We already talked about how that might be offensive, but
in the last episode.
That's okay.
We also otherwise known as cruisers.
Cruisers, yes. So again, thank you, Bex, for coming on. It was an amazing conversation. We can't wait to bring you back on the show, have an interview, and talk about your whole story. That's coming out in a few weeks. Spoiler alert, we've already done the conversation.
Yes.
So, yes.
And I think that's it.
I think that's it.
We'll see everyone next week. Bye.
TTYL.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.